What's up, Tsla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the broader markets. And break down why Tesla and the markets do look a bit more bullish for now. But there is a risk of rejection at some key levels, which I'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link that's down below or use my QR code right here to sign up. If you sign up for Moomoo with the link down below and deposit $100, you're going to get $20 of free Nvidia stock. If you deposit $2,000, you're going to get $50 worth of Nvidia. If you deposit $10,000, you're going to get $50 worth of the stock, or deposits $50,000 to get $1,000 of free Nvidia. Now it's going to qualify for an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. That includes a 3.6% APY base rate plus a 4.5% APY extra for 3 months. And the offer ends very soon, so please check out my link down below to sign up. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the markets. So as far as Tesla's going, I just want to mention that we have a nice looking double bottom like structure right over here. And we're going to see if Tesla could try to continue to go a little bit higher for now. But the problem is that Tesla is forming a rising wedge as it goes higher, and there is a risk of the whole market coming down. As you know, when the market comes down, Tesla has a tendency of following the markets. As the market squeezes, we tend to see Tesla follow that as well. Now, keep in mind that there's a rising wedge right here, and there is a slight divergence forming on Tesla. However, there's also a gap right here that's worth mentioning, which does give me some risk, at least for Tesla. There's a gap down to 393 that's unfilled, and it's still very possible that Tesla gets the rug pull in case we do get some kind of rejection. Now, we're bullish right now. As of right now, we're bullish, right? We're climbing higher in this rising wedge. We're climbing higher. We could be going a bit higher on Tesla. But if we get the rejection, if we end up losing this 418 area where the 200 EMA happens to be, then beware, guys. We do have a risk of potentially turning back down. So watch that very closely. So what's going on with the market? We do have some catalysts that could be affecting Tesla in the markets. It's also worth mentioning that SPY also has a very similar setup. We have a rising wedge-like pattern also forming right here. And in case SPY also gets a rejection off this area. So we have this 685 area, which is where SPY got a big rejection. Also rejecting your 685 2 times before. If we push to 685, we push a little bit higher than reject. There could be a risk of some downside with the rising wedge. Same thing with the QQQ. We have a tendency of rejecting near the mid 620s, so we could slowly uptrend for 625, and we'll see if we reject. So keep that all in mind. So my point is, if Tesla and the market push together, let's just say that SPY goes to like 685, the QQQ goes for like 625 as well, and the market pushes with Tesla trying to go for that like 435 to 440 area. If we see a big rejection on SPY and the QQQ at the key resistances, Tesla could follow the trend and come back down and retest these EMAs. And if those fail us, there is a risk of us returning towards the lower 400s. And there is a risk of that potentially happening on Tesla. So just keep that in mind. That's something to remember, at least heading into the week. So what's going to be affecting Tesla? I just want to remind you all, first and foremost, tomorrow is going to be Monday, December 1st, 2025. Sometimes when you start a new month, the algorithms tend to adjust, at least for the markets. So, for example, as we start October, we start to see some more variance in the price action. And since November started, we saw the market initially dump, only to see a big V-shaped move back up, at least for the final week. So December could be very similar. As we start December, we're going to see if the market gets a rug pull or not. At 9:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we basically have the S&P Global Manufacturing PMI report. And then at 10 o'clock a.m., we have the ISM Manufacturing PMI, Employment New Orders and Prices. So basically, there's lots of manufacturing numbers 15 and 30 minutes after the stock market opens tomorrow at 9:45 and 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then we have some bill auctions at 11:30, which is quite minor, but the big thing is also going to be at 8 p.m. as we have the big guy Jerome Powell giving a speech. That's going to be very important, so get ready for that. So what's Jerome Powell's speech going to be about? Well, he's going to be giving brief remarks, and he's going to be once again involved in a discussion with Michael Boskin, and he's going to be talking to many others about economic policy contributions. This is going to be taking place at Stanford in California, so that's very important. We will see if Jerome Powell says anything about interest rates, his view about the economy. If he talks about the data that's been coming out, how it's affecting the Fed's policies, I believe he could cause some volatility. Once again, looking at other sources, we're seeing the same thing being confirmed. Jerome Powell's speech will be at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we're also looking at some manufacturing numbers, at least for the overall market. So keep that in mind. A couple more things. Also, keep in mind that with everything that's coming out, this is also making up our economic calendar so far. Manufacturing numbers in the morning, then Jerome Powell's speech in the evening. The market has an 87.4% chance of getting a 25 basis point cut for FOMC heading into Jerome Powell's speech, essentially. So for the last week, the market's been gaining lots of confidence of us getting a cut because of what we're hearing from Fed speakers and also because of some employment numbers. However, the problem is that there's still more data to come out, and Jerome Powell could change this. If Jerome Powell is more hawkish or if he's very uncertain about a cut, this could come down, causing us to have a less likely probability of getting a cut, or he could cause us to go up, which could be bullish for the markets. We will see what the big guy has to say. One thing that is certain is that the Fed is buying back treasuries at a bigger rates. Looking at the overnight repurchase agreements, again, they're going up. They're going up again, even from last Friday, which tells us the Fed is easing on policies. Slowly but surely, they are easing up little by little. So we will see what Jerome Powell has to say. The bigger concern for lots of Fed officials would be the labor market. So we will see if that is what influences Jerome Powell and the Fed. Monday, which is tomorrow, there's not really much coming out for earnings, but for Tuesday, we basically have some banks and very, very minor data. For Wednesday, we have Dollar Tree and Macy's in the morning alongside Salesforce, Snowflake, and a few more after market close. We also have Dollar General and a few more on Thursday, so we'll see what that leads to. On top of this, the fear and greed index is currently at extreme fears, making up the majority of sentiment. Momentum is at neutral, and then we also have the puts call option ratio dropping as we're seeing less puts being bought. And finally, the VIX is neutral as well, so that's very important because the VIX is near a big support. What do I think is going to happen? Here is my view of the markets. We're just going to focus on the charts now and kind of take in what all the data has been telling us. So, for the short term, meaning for the last couple of days, the trend is bullish. Tesla's been making higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, and higher lows. And it looks like it could be going for 430 tomorrow. If that holds, I'm looking for an attempt for 435. That's going to be previous resistance becoming support right here, followed by 440. So 435 to 440 is very possible for Tesla for some temporary upside, which would be fantastic. However, as Tesla climbs higher, just like SPY and the QQQ, there's a rising wedge that's forming. And then when you look at, I think the daily time frame shows this. Let me just double check. Actually, the daily time frame doesn't really show this. It has to be on the 4 hour because this was during a pre-market. We basically formed a gap. We formed a gap on Tesla back around Friday, November 21st. That's when this gap was kind of like starting. So last week, or about a week and a half ago, there was like this gap that formed. And in case we do get a rug pull, I'm going to be watching to see if we come back down to fill this gap. Now, if you want to be really bullish, I would love to see Tesla take out these highs. If we take out like 442, I do expect Tesla to continue to take off, and we're looking for 450 next. If we break 435 and 442, the 450 area is next. However, if we're bearish, if you want to be a big bear on Tesla, you want to see us essentially lose 418. If 418 fails, this is where the 200 EMA is. I think that there is a risk of us returning back down to the lower 400s, like around 406. This low right here could easily be retested. So I think what's going to happen is this. This is my prediction. Tesla is making higher highs and higher lows. And to start things off, I think we attempt to go for 435 or a little bit higher on Tesla. However, as time goes on, keep in mind the closer we get to 440, Tesla's gone into rejections here, and there is some tough resistance. So around 435 or a little bit higher, we could be looking for a big rug pull and a move back down towards 418. I do see a risk of that looking at Tesla and based off the current technicals. As of right now, we're bullish, so I do expect some more upside, but there is that risk of rejection looking at Tesla's setup and also looking at SPY and the QQQ. So on SPY, the first thing you'll notice is that this is also resembling kind of like an inverse head and shoulders. So if you don't see it, it looks like this. Basically, one way to look at this is that this is like a left shoulder. This is like a head. And then this could be a right shoulder that's about to form before we try to get some kind of balance, but that's a possibility. That's number one. Number two, okay, the second confluence is this. SPY rejected off 685, 1, 2, 3 times. we touched 685 and rejected. If we're bullish, you want to see us break 685 and go for like the all-time high. If we're bearish, you want to see us reject and basically lose support at 675. If 675, this resistance becoming support right here, breaks, then we could be looking for a big move back down towards like 666 in the low 660s. Judging by the current setup, there's also a rising wedge on SPY. And there's a slight divergence, but it's not too bad, so I wouldn't really count that too much. Instead, look at the rising wedge. We're going to see if this plays out or not, and be careful at 685. I predict SPY goes for 685 tomorrow for some more upside, but there is a risk of us getting a rejection back down to 675 if that ends up being the case. So that is my prediction for now. On the QQQ, very identical setup. One more thing about SPY before I get on with the QQQ. When you go to essentially this low right here, and when you kind of like bounce back up to like 685, the golden pocket aligns very closely with where this right shoulder happens to be. So that basically tells us that if we kind of like push to like 685 and get a rejection, this is very close to where the golden pocket happens to be, forming a symmetrical inverse head and shoulders. That's just something else I noticed. But anyways, we're bullish, looking for 685, and we'll see if we get a rejection. Same thing with the QQQ, higher highs and higher lows. As long as we don't end up losing essentially 610, we're going to be favoring 620, then 625 as our resistances. Then we're going to see if we get a rejection off this rising wedge. So as you can tell, we're on a downtrend, but with the possible inverse head and shoulders, we're on a rising wedge on the QQQ. We could be looking for 625 for some temporary upside. And I predict we go for like the low 620s on the QQQ. Then we're going to be watching to see if we get a rug pull with the rising wedge forming. I'll be watching that very closely back down towards the 610s. On the IWM, we also have a slanted inverse head and shoulders like pattern. We have a left shoulder, a head, and then a possible right shoulder for a slanted inverse head and shoulders that could lead to a bounce. So near 250, see if we get a rejection back down to 243, and we'll see if we bounce. On ES, you have an inverse head and shoulders that's looking a bit more bullish, but here's the thing. There's also a giant inverse head and shoulders. This is like a left shoulder. This is like the head. So we're still in like the head. And if this pans out, you could see us go a little higher for like 6,900, maybe a little bit below that for some temporary upside. And then watch and see if you reject near 6,900 to form our right shoulder before we try to bounce back up for the end of the year, right? A move like that is very possible, very probable on ES. So this tells us we're bullish. As long as we don't do 6,800, we're going to be favoring 6,880 to 6,900. Then we'll see if we reject back down to form that right shoulder. On NQ, we basically have a left shoulder, a head, and possibly a right shoulder forming. We're going to see if we bounce off that or not. However, looking at the 4-hour time frame, because we're above 25,000, we're still favoring upside on NQ. I anticipate some temporary upside for essentially these imbalances, taking us up to 25,600 to 25,800, then see if we get a rejection or not. Bitcoin looks a bit more bullish for now, inverse head and shoulders. But if we lose 90,000, of course, I will change my mind and look for 86,000. We could push for like 92,000. We'll see if we get a rejection or not. On Tesla, we're looking a bit more decent. We're making higher highs and higher lows. If we end up losing basically 418, we're looking for a rug pull. But I think that we might temporarily push back up to 435 to 440 first. Then we'll see if we get a rejection back down or not. On Nvda, we're making lower highs over and over again. We're going to likely continue to make lower highs. We could retest 180, then reject and continue to fall to 174, so don't be worried. On Aapl, we're also consolidating here. We could be tipping back down towards this 275 area, and we'll see if we bounce. I anticipate some consolidation, a bit of a sell-off, and we'll see if we bounce or not. On Netflix, we have a nice looking double bottom here. We're going to see if we continue to break past 108 or not. If we lose 106, we're turning back down. I anticipate some consolidation and a bounce, at least for the time being. MSTR has a quadruple bottom. We're going to see if we bounce. We might consolidate between around the 180 area, and we'll see if we bounce. Celsius is still looking decent. I think we test 40 flats, and we'll see if we bounce. There might be a temporary downside move coming. Supermicro, however, looks more bullish with the double bottom. It's going to be favoring 35.34 as our target for some temporary upside. Palantir, as long as we're above 169, we're going to be favoring a pushback up to like 172. I think we favor upside. Rivian has a nice looking accumulation right over here. As long as we don't do 16.5, we're favoring 17.4. SoFi has an inverse head and shoulders like pattern. As long as we don't do 28, we're going to be favoring a pushback up towards the 30 area, around 31. AMD is going to be favoring 217 to 222 for some temporary upside with the double bottom here. So I see some upside potential. ARM, as long as you don't lose 134, we're going to be looking for 139. On PayPal, we have a nice looking accumulation. As long as you don't lose 62.5, we're going to be favoring a pushback up to 64. Coinbase also has an inverse head and shoulders. As long as you don't lose 270, we're going to be favoring a pushback up towards that 285 area. Amazon has a nice looking inverse head and shoulders. As long as you don't lose 230, we're going to be favoring a pushback up towards 235. Meta is looking more bullish. Nice accumulation as well. And we could be looking for basically 650. Google is on a bit of a downtrend, favoring 315 for some temporary downside. And Microsoft is going to be looking for a test of 494 for some upside. And we're going to see if we get a rejection near there, as we have rejected in the past. But it could be forming an inverse head and shoulders. The VIX likes to bounce near the 15s. We're going to see if we bounce here. We might dip a little bit first before we attempt to bounce. And then the dollar could be looking for a small bounce to 99.6, and we'll see how it goes. With that being said, just like the overall market, I think Tesla's forming a rising wedge. And we could be looking for an attempt for the low 430s. 435 could be tested as we continue to form this rising wedge, right? But even though Tesla might go a bit higher, we're going to be looking for a possible rug pull for the overall market. It's a possibility, not a guarantee. So wait for confirmation. See if the market gets a rejection near these high levels. If Tesla rejects near 435 to 440, if SPY rejects near 685, if the QQQ rejects closer to like 625, do we push a bit more than reject or not? We'll see, just to be safe. I just want to give you guys a warning heading into the current setups, but I'll give you guys more updates heading into tomorrow. Also, another factor affecting Tesla's Tesla news. So we'll see how it goes. But for now, this setup favors some upside, and we'll see if we get a rejection as we approach resistance. I'll be back tomorrow with another update. Until then, I wish you all nothing but the best. I thank you all so much for listening. Have an awesome rest of your guys' Thanksgiving weekends, and I'll be back very soon tomorrow. Thank you for listening, and peace out.